You have a version of yourself you think about constantly. The one who wakes up at 5 a.m., who's disciplined, confident, and successful, who has their life together. You imagine them in detail. What they eat for breakfast, how they handle conflict, how they move through the social world without second guessing everything. This person is perfect, exactly who you're supposed to be. And they don't exist. They never will. Because you created an idealized version of yourself that's impossible to become. And every day you're not them, you hate yourself a little more. Here's what that imaginary version of you is doing to you. It's making your actual life feel like a failure. The real you hits snooze, gets anxious, procrastinates, makes mistakes, has bad days, feels insecure. And every time real you does something human, the imaginary you stands there in your mind, disappointed, shaking their head, proving that you're not living up to your potential. You measure yourself against someone who doesn't have to deal with your depression, with your trauma, your actual circumstances. Someone who exists in perfect conditions with unlimited willpower. That's not a goal, that's a weapon you're using against yourself. Let's get specific. Imaginary you is a morning person. They wake up refreshed, meditate, journal, work out, eat a perfect breakfast. The real you snooze your alarm 4 times, scroll your phone, feel guilty about not being productive, rush through the morning hating yourself, and you think if you just tried harder, you could become morning person. But here's the truth. You have tried hundreds of times. You have set the alarm, made the plan, promised yourself tomorrow would be different. And it lasted 3 days, maybe a week. Then you went back to being you. Because imaginary you doesn't have your nervous system, your sleep issues, your actual life. They exist in a fantasy where everything is easier. Imaginary you is socially confident. They walk into rooms and own them, make friends easily, say the right thing, never overthink. Real you rehearses conversations in your head, replays interactions for hours analyzing what you should have said, avoids social situations because they're exhausting, and you think you're failing at being the person you're supposed to be. But that confident version, they don't have your social anxiety. They didn't grow up the way you did. They don't carry the wounds that make you protective. You're comparing your reality to someone else's starting point and calling yourself a failure for not being further along than you actually are. The imaginary you is insanely productive. They never waste time, never scroll mindlessly, always working on their goals with laser focus. The real you gets distracted, procrastinates, has days where you accomplish nothing and feel like garbage about it. And you beat yourself up. Why can't I just be disciplined? Why do I waste so much time? Why is everyone else doing more than me? But imaginary you doesn't have executive dysfunction, doesn't deal with burnout, doesn't need rest or recovery or moments of doing absolutely nothing. They are a productivity robot, and you're a human, and humans aren't built to be machines. Imaginary you is the perfect partner, emotionally available, communicative, never defensive, always patient. The real you shut down during conflict, you get triggered, you say things you regret, you need space when they need closeness. And every time you fail to be imaginary you in your relationship, you think you're proving you're unlovable. But imaginary you doesn't have attachment wounds, doesn't have trauma responses, doesn't need to heal while also trying to love someone. You're expecting yourself to show up healed when you are still healing, and punishing yourself for not being further along than you are. Imaginary you has the body you want. They are fit, healthy, disciplined about food and exercise. They look the way you think you're supposed to look. Real you struggles with consistency, has body image issues, emotionally eats, skips workouts and feels shame about it. And you look in the mirror and see failure. Because you're not them yet. Because you keep starting and stopping. Because transformation is taking longer than you thought. But imaginary you doesn't have your metabolism, your relationship with food, your history with your body. They just exist perfect, without the journey. You're comparing your middle to their imaginary end and hating yourself for not being there instantly. But here's what you're actually missing out. There's another version, the shadow. The parts of yourself you reject, the laziness, the selfishness, the prettiness, the darkness, the needs you're ashamed of. You spend so much energy trying to become the ideal that you're at war with the parts that don't fit the image. And those rejected parts, they don't disappear. They leak out. They sabotage you. They show up as self-destructive patterns you can't seem to break. Because you can't become whole by rejecting half of yourself. You can't grow by hating your starting point. What actually works is not becoming the imaginary you, but integrating the real you. All of you. The version that's disciplined and the version that needs rest. The confident part and the insecure part. The productive days and the burnout days. Stop trying to eliminate the parts that don't fit the fantasy. Start accepting that you're complex, contradictory, and human. You don't need to be one thing. You can be multiple things at the same time. Morning person some days, night owl other days. Social when you have energy, introverted when you need recovery. The goal isn't consistency with an imaginary ideal. It's authenticity with who you actually are. So what if, instead of measuring yourself against imaginary you started seeing the real you? Not with disappointment, but with compassion. With recognition of how far you have actually come. With the acknowledgement of what you're dealing with that imaginary you never had to face. The real you wakes up despite depression. Shows up despite anxiety. Keeps trying despite repeated failures. That's not weakness. That's the strength imaginary you never needed to develop. The real you is doing the actual work. Imaginary you just gets to exist, perfect in your mind, judging you for being human. Here is the brutal truth. As long as you're chasing imaginary you, you'll never arrive. Because the imaginary you will always stay one step ahead. Every time you make progress, they will level up. Every time you achieve something, they will have already moved to the next goal. They're not a destination, they're a moving target designed to keep you feeling insufficient. And the real tragedy, while you're chasing them, you're missing the actual you. The one who's here, trying, growing, imperfectly becoming. You're allowed to be messy, you're allowed to not have it all together. You are allowed to be the person who struggles, who takes longer than they thought, who doesn't match the fantasy they created. Because that person is real. And real is the only place growth actually happens. The imaginary you doesn't need to grow. They're already perfect. But the real you, you're in the arena, facing actual challenges, building actual resilience that's worth more than any fantasy. So stop measuring yourself against the version that only exists in your head. They're not real. They never were. Start seeing the version that wakes up every day and tries. That's messy and imperfect and still showing up. That version deserves your respect, your compassion, your recognition. Because they are doing something imaginary you never had to do. They are being human, fully, imperfectly, and courageously. And maybe that's better than perfect. Maybe that's real growth. Not becoming someone else, but finally accepting who you actually are. The version in your head can stay there. Let them be perfect and impossible. But you get to be real. And real is where life actually happens.